The mysterious signal. It was a quiet night, the kind that wrapped the small town in a blanket of silence. Liam, a 28-year-old with a knack for fixing old gadgets, sat in his cramped but cozy cabin, tinkering with his vintage radio set. The room smelled faintly of solder and coffee, a mix that had become the scent of his late-night adventures. This was his favorite hobby, scanning the airwaves for something, anything, unusual. The static on the radio crackled softly as he turned the dial. His fingers worked expertly, adjusting knobs, listening for a faint whisper of something interesting. Usually, he found nothing but old broadcasts, distant chatter, or interference. But tonight was different. A sound emerged from the static, soft at first, like a faint hum. It was rhythmic, almost musical. Liam leaned closer, adjusting the frequency. The sound grew clearer, sending a chill up his spine. It wasn't random noise. It had a pattern. Almost like a melody. "What is this?" Liam murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He grabbed a notepad and jotted down the sequence of tones. The pattern repeated, but this time there was a faint, eerie chirping in the background, like the song of a bird. It was beautiful and haunting at the same time. The hum shifted again, and Liam's heart skipped a beat. Through the static, he heard what sounded like a voice. It was faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Liam. He froze. The voice had spoken his name. His mind raced with possibilities. Was this some prank? A broadcast picking up interference? But how would anyone know his name? He turned up the volume, his hands trembling slightly. "Hello," he said aloud, as if expecting the mysterious voice to respond. Silence. The signal faded into static again, and for a moment, he thought he'd lost it. But then it returned, stronger this time. The voice wasn't clear, but it was undeniably there. A single word emerged from the chaos of sounds. "Help." The hairs on Liam's neck stood on end. He pushed his chair back, suddenly feeling exposed in his little cabin. He stared at the radio, the glowing dials casting an eerie green light in the dark room. What was this? A distress call? Some advanced prank? Or something else entirely? Liam wasn't the type to believe in the supernatural. He liked logical explanations. But this was something he couldn't explain. He played the recording back, his mind racing. The voice sounded almost human, but there was a strange, bird-like trill in its tone, like a song woven into words. Curiosity got the better of him. He grabbed his flashlight and jacket, stepping out into the crisp night air. The world outside was calm. The stars scattered across the sky like tiny jewels. The moonlight bathed the forest in a silver glow, casting long, eerie shadows. Liam didn't know what he was looking for, but his gut told him the signal wasn't random. Something was out there. He walked to the edge of the woods, the crunch of leaves under his boots the only sound breaking the stillness. As he moved deeper into the trees, his flashlight beam swept across the ground. That's when he saw it. Something unusual, something out of place. Feathers. They glowed faintly, like tiny shards of light scattered on the forest floor. Liam crouched, picking one up. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly, almost like it was alive. He stared at it, baffled. Feathers didn't glow. At least, not any feathers he'd ever seen. The signal from the radio played in his head again, the strange melodic hum echoing in his thoughts. The voice had said, "Help." Was this connected? A rustling sound snapped him out of his thoughts. His flashlight swung to the left, catching the briefest glimpse of something moving between the trees. It was fast, too fast to follow. Liam's heart pounded in his chest. He wasn't alone out here. "Hello," he called, his voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" No answer, just the rustling of leaves and the faint whisper of the wind. He stood there, gripping the glowing feather tightly, unsure of whether to stay or run. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw it, a figure perched high in the trees. It wasn't human. The figure had a humanoid shape, but with massive wings that shimmered faintly in the moonlight. Its head tilted, almost bird-like, as it watched him. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move, couldn't think. All he could do was stare. The figure let out a soft, musical chirp, the sound resonating through the forest like a forgotten melody. It felt familiar, the same sound he'd heard through the radio. Before he could say or do anything, the figure spread its wings and vanished into the night, leaving behind only the faint glow of scattered feathers. Liam stood there, frozen, clutching the feather in his hand. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. He had a feeling his quiet, ordinary life had just taken a turn he wasn't ready for. The mysterious signal had found him. And now so had it. The bird woman's arrival. The next morning, Liam woke to a sound he couldn't quite place, something between the flap of giant wings and the crackle of electricity. His small cabin rattled faintly, as though something heavy had landed nearby. Groggy, he stumbled out of bed, his mind still clouded with memories of the strange signal and the glowing feather he had found the night before. The feather lay on his desk, still glowing faintly. Liam picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It was unlike anything he'd ever seen, light as air, yet it seemed to pulse with some kind of energy. Before he could think too deeply about it, a loud boom shook the ground. His coffee mug toppled from the table, shattering on the floor. Heart pounding, Liam grabbed his jacket and flashlight and rushed outside. The air smelled sharp, like ozone after a lightning strike. Smoke rose in the distance, just beyond the edge of the forest. Liam's gut tightened. The crash site wasn't far, too close to ignore. Despite every instinct telling him to stay put, his curiosity pulled him forward. He jogged into the woods, the trees casting long shadows over the uneven ground. As he got closer, the smoke thickened, and the scent of burning metal filled the air. And then he saw it. A spacecraft, if you could call it that, was half buried in the earth, its sleek, alien design unlike anything from Earth. It shimmered with a strange, liquid-like surface, reflecting the sunlight in rippling patterns. Sparks danced along its fractured hull, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its edges. Liam's breath caught in his throat. He wasn't sure if it was fear or awe. Maybe both. He took a cautious step forward, the ground still warm beneath his boots. That's when he heard it, a soft, pained chirp. It was coming from behind the wreckage. Liam edged closer, his eyes scanning the debris. There, slumped against a twisted piece of the ship, was the source of the sound. It was her. The creature looked humanoid but otherworldly, her body a blend of soft, feathered wings and sleek, glowing patterns etched into her skin. Her feathers shimmered like the ones he had found earlier, but now they were dull, some singed from the crash. She clutched her side, her breathing shallow and labored. Liam froze, unsure of what to do. His mind raced. She looked fragile, almost delicate, but there was an undeniable power in her presence. Her head tilted slightly, and her eyes, large, luminous, and filled with an unearthly intelligence, locked onto his. Help. Her voice was weak but unmistakable. It wasn't just a word. It was a plea. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Liam took a step closer. You're the one from last night, aren't you? The signal. She blinked slowly, her wings twitching as she tried to push herself upright. They're coming, she whispered, her voice layered with a strange melodic quality. You must hide. Who's coming? Liam asked, his voice barely above a whisper, but she didn't answer. Instead, her gaze shifted to the sky, her expression darkening. Liam followed her eyes and felt his stomach drop. High above, strange, shadowy shapes darted through the clouds. They moved unnaturally fast, their forms barely visible against the bright blue sky. Get up, he said, his fear overridden by urgency. We have to get out of here. She shook her head weakly. Too late. They found me. A sudden, piercing screech filled the air, unlike anything Liam had ever heard. It was shrill, mechanical, and filled with malice. The shapes in the sky grew larger, descending rapidly. Liam didn't think, he acted. He crouched down, pulling her arm over his shoulder. "I don't know who you are or what's happening, but I'm not leaving you here," he said, his voice firm. For a moment, she looked at him with something like surprise. Then, with a faint nod, she let him help her to her feet. Her wings dragged behind her, their glow flickering like a dying flame. As they stumbled away from the crash site, the screeches grew louder. Liam could feel his heart hammering in his chest. Whatever those things were, they weren't friendly. The forest closed in around them, its shadows deep and foreboding. Liam kept moving, his mind racing for a plan. He didn't know how far they could get, or if they could even escape, but one thing was clear: this was no ordinary encounter, and his life would never be the same again. The chase begins. The forest was alive with an unnatural hum, a vibration that Liam could feel deep in his chest. It wasn't the wind, nor the rustling of leaves. It was something far more menacing. He crouched behind a fallen tree, barely daring to breathe. Beside him, Kara, the alien bird woman, leaned heavily against the bark, her feathers dim and her breath ragged. "They're close," she whispered, her voice layered with a faint trill, almost like a bird's song. "Who?" Liam asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. Kara's glowing eyes darted to the canopy above. "The Vorax." Liam swallowed hard. "And what exactly are they?" "Hunters," she said, her voice barely audible. "They destroy anything different, and they don't leave survivors." Before Liam could respond, the hum grew louder. A shadow passed overhead, followed by another. Whatever these Vorax were, they were fast, and they were searching. Kara grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "We must move. Now." Liam nodded, helping her to her feet. They ran deeper into the forest, the ground uneven and littered with roots and rocks. Every step felt like a gamble. Each sound they made a potential beacon for their pursuers. Suddenly, a piercing screech tore through the air. Liam froze, his heart pounding in his ears. The sound was mechanical, predatory, and unrelenting. He looked up and saw it. A sleek, shadowy drone with shifting, liquid-like armor that seemed to absorb the light. It hovered above the trees, scanning the ground with a glowing red beam. "Don't move," Kara hissed, pulling him down behind a thicket. The beam swept past them, its light grazing Liam's hand. He held his breath, his pulse racing. The drone lingered for a moment, its eerie hum vibrating through the air. Then, with a sudden jolt, it zipped off into the distance. Liam exhaled shakily. "What are those things?" "Scouts," Kara said, her voice tense. "They hunt in packs. If one finds us, the others will follow." Liam's mind raced. He had no weapons, no plan, and no idea how to outrun something like that. But Kara, she had survived this far. "What do we do?" he asked. Kara closed her eyes for a moment, her wings twitching. "There's a cave. A mile from here. It's shielded. They won't detect us inside." "A mile." Liam glanced at her, noting the way she leaned heavily on her injured side. "Can you make it?" "I have to," she said simply. They moved quickly but carefully, weaving through the dense forest. The hum of the drones seemed to echo from every direction, keeping them on edge. Liam couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the forest itself had turned against them. Just as the cave came into view, a deafening roar erupted behind them. Liam turned, his blood running cold. 3 drones burst through the trees, their movements impossibly fluid and fast. Their red beams scanned the forest floor, locking onto their fleeing figures. "Run," Kara shouted, her voice sharper now, commanding. Liam sprinted toward the cave, his legs burning with effort. Kara was right behind him, her wings flaring out as if to shield him. The drones closed in, their beams slicing through branches and foliage like knives. One beam struck a tree just beside Liam, exploding it into splinters. He stumbled, hitting the ground hard. Kara skidded to a halt, turning back for him. "No," Liam shouted. "Keep going." But she didn't listen. She darted toward him, her movements swift despite her injuries. With a single motion, she extended her wings and released a high-pitched cry that reverberated through the air. The sound was piercing, almost unbearable, but it worked. The drones faltered, their beams flickering as they struggled to maintain their balance. "Move," Kara yelled, grabbing Liam by the arm and pulling him to his feet. They bolted into the cave just as the drones recovered. The moment they crossed the threshold, the hum stopped, the air grew still. Liam turned, expecting the drones to follow, but they didn't. The cave's entrance shimmered faintly, as though an invisible barrier had been activated. Kara slumped against the wall, her breathing heavy. "We're safe, for now." Liam stared at her, his chest heaving. What was that sound you made?" "A defense," she said, her voice weak. "A gift from my kind. But it won't stop them for long." Liam nodded, his mind reeling. "Why are they after you? What do they want?" Kara's glowing eyes met his. "Because I'm the last, and because I know how to stop them." Liam's heart sank. Whatever he had gotten himself into, it was bigger than he'd imagined. But one thing was clear. If the Vorax wanted Kara, they weren't going to stop until they had her. And now, they'd wanted him too. A friend or a trap? The cave was dark and silent, except for the faint hum of energy that seemed to radiate from its walls. Liam and Kara sat in the shadows, catching their breath. The Vorax drones had been relentless, but for now, they were safe, or so Liam hoped. Kara's glowing feathers flickered weakly as she leaned against the wall. Her exhaustion was evident, but her eyes were fixed on a device she had pulled from her side, a small circular object that pulsed faintly with light. "It's a locator," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "A locator for what?" Liam asked. "For him," Kara replied. Her voice carried a strange mix of hope and fear. Liam frowned. "You mean there's someone else out there?" Kara nodded. "Rin. He's like me. We escaped together, but we were separated when the Vorax attacked our ship. If he's alive, this will guide us to him." "Do you trust him?" Liam's tone was cautious. "I have to," Kara said, but there was hesitation in her voice. The locator's pulse quickened, and Kara's expression sharpened. "He's close," she said, standing despite her visible fatigue. "We have to find him." The forest was eerily quiet as they followed the locator's signal. Liam's grip tightened around the crude weapon he had fashioned from a branch. He wasn't sure what he was expecting to face, but he knew better than to let his guard down. The signal led them to a clearing where the trees parted, revealing a small rocky outcrop. There, standing in the center, was Rin. He was taller than Kara, his wings broader and his feathers darker, shimmering with a faint iridescent glow. His eyes, however, were unnerving. Unlike Kara's warm, golden gaze, Rin's eyes were cold, almost predatory. He turned slowly as they approached, his expression unreadable. "Kara," he said, his voice smooth but void of warmth. "You survived." "So did you," Kara replied, her tone wary. She stepped closer, her wings twitching slightly. "I thought the Vorax had taken you." "They tried," Rin said, tilting his head, "but I'm stronger than they thought." Liam shifted uncomfortably. Something about Rin didn't sit right with him. He stayed a few steps behind Kara, watching the interaction carefully. "Who's this?" Rin asked, his eyes flicking to Liam. "Liam," Kara said. "He helped me escape. He's trustworthy." Rin's gaze lingered on Liam for a moment longer than necessary. Then he smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "A human? Interesting." Liam didn't like the way Rin said it, as if he were analyzing a bug under a microscope. "Nice to meet you too," he said, his tone flat. Kara stepped closer to Rin. The Vorax are closing in. We need to move. Rin nodded. Agreed. But first, before anyone could react, Rin lunged. His hand shot out, grabbing Kara by the arm and pulling her close. His other hand pressed against her side, where her feathers glowed faintly. Kara gasped, her body tensing as a faint red light began to seep from her wounds. "What are you doing?" Liam shouted, stepping forward. Kara struggled, her voice strained. "Liam, stay back." Rin's grip tightened as the red light grew brighter. His smile turned into a sneer. "I'm sorry, Kara," he said, his tone mocking, "but they made me an offer I couldn't refuse." "You betrayed us," Kara whispered, her voice trembling with anger. "They showed me the truth," Rin replied. "Our kind is doomed, Kara. But me? I don't have to be." Liam didn't think. He grabbed the nearest rock and hurled it at Rin, hitting him square in the shoulder. The impact startled him enough to loosen his grip on Kara. She broke free, stumbling back into Liam's arms. Rin hissed, his eyes glowing with an unnatural red light. "You should have stayed out of this, human." Kara stepped forward, her wings flaring despite her obvious pain. "This ends now, Rin." He laughed coldly. "You can't stop me. Not anymore." But Kara didn't flinch. She extended her wings and released a sharp, piercing cry. The sound hit Rin like a wave, sending him stumbling backward. For a moment, his red glow flickered, and he dropped to one knee. "This isn't over," Rin growled, glaring at them. Then, with a powerful beat of his wings, he took off into the night, disappearing into the shadows. Back in the safety of the cave, Liam turned to Kara. "What was that?" "He's one of your own, isn't he?" "He was," Kara said, her voice heavy with sorrow. "But the Vorax have corrupted him. They've planted something inside him, something that twists his mind and makes him their puppet." Liam stared at her, the weight of the situation sinking in. "If they can do that to him, what's stopping them from doing it to you?" Kara didn't answer. Instead, she looked down at the glowing device in her hand. "They'll come for him. And when they do, they'll come for us." Liam clenched his fists. Whatever was happening, it was far bigger than he had imagined. And now, they were running out of time. Trust broken, truth revealed. The cave felt colder than before, its natural hum replaced by an unsettling silence. Liam sat against the wall, his mind racing. Kara paced the narrow space, her wings dragging slightly, her movements stiff and agitated. The encounter with Rin had left more questions than answers, and an uneasy tension in the air. "He was one of you," Liam said finally, breaking the silence. "How did it come to this?" Kara paused, her glowing eyes fixed on the ground. "Rin and I were leaders among the Aviarans," she said softly. "We were tasked with finding new worlds for our people to inhabit. We believed we could escape the Vorax, but they were always one step ahead." Liam leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "What happened to him?" Kara's feathers flickered faintly as she spoke. "The Vorax have a weapon, a parasite. It latches onto your mind, feeding on your fears and turning them into loyalty. They don't kill you outright. They twist you, make you their pawn." Liam's stomach turned. "And you think they've done that to Rin?" Kara nodded. "I saw it in his eyes. The red glow. It's a mark of the Vorax's control. He's no longer Rin, not entirely. But the real danger is what he knows." "What do you mean?" Liam asked. Kara met his gaze, her expression grim. "He knows about me, about you, and about this planet." Hours later, the tension hadn't eased. Liam and Kara had ventured deeper into the cave, following its winding tunnels in search of a better hiding spot. The natural glow of the cave walls provided a dim light, but it did little to ease Liam's growing unease. As they walked, Kara suddenly stopped, her feathers stiffening. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Liam paused, frowning. "Feel what?" Kara closed her eyes, her head tilting slightly. The air. It's wrong. Before Liam could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cave. The ground beneath them trembled, and tiny rocks fell from the ceiling. The sound wasn't natural. It was rhythmic, mechanical. The Vorax. Kara's wings flared. They found us. How? Liam asked, his voice tight with fear. Kara's expression darkened. Rin. He must have placed a tracker on me during the fight. Liam's heart sank. Can you get it off? She shook her head. If I try, it'll trigger a signal that brings the Vorax here faster. We need to move. They sprinted deeper into the cave, the sound of the approaching Vorax growing louder. The tunnels twisted and turned, the walls narrowing until they had to crouch to move forward. The hum of the Vorax drones seemed to echo from all directions, making it impossible to tell where they were coming from. Finally, they emerged into a larger chamber, its walls covered in glowing crystals. The sight would have been beautiful if not for the imminent threat. Kara turned to Liam, her expression resolute. There's something I haven't told you, she said. Liam frowned. What now? Kara hesitated, then took a deep breath. The Vorax aren't here just for me. They're here because of what I know, because of what I carry. What you carry? Liam repeated, his voice rising. What does that mean? Kara reached into her side, where her feathers parted to reveal a faintly glowing shard embedded in her skin. It pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. This is the core of our ship, the heart of our technology. It's why the Vorax want me. With this, they can wipe out entire worlds. Liam stared at the shard, his mind reeling. You've had this the whole time. I had no choice, Kara said. If I left it behind, they would have taken it. But as long as I have it, I'm a target. Liam ran a hand through his hair, pacing the chamber. So what's the plan? We can't keep running forever. Kara looked down at the shard, her expression pained. I can destroy it, but doing so it would take everything I have. Liam stopped in his tracks. What do you mean, everything you have? Kara met his gaze, her eyes filled with a quiet determination. The shard is tied to me. If I destroy it, it will take me with it. No, Liam said immediately. There has to be another way. There isn't, Kara said firmly. The Vorax won't stop until they have it. If they succeed, your world will suffer the same fate as mine. Liam shook his head. We'll figure something out. We always do. Before Kara could respond, the chamber shook violently. The Vorax had arrived. Their drones poured into the chamber, their red beams slicing through the air. Kara pushed Liam behind her, her wings flaring wide. Go, she shouted. I'll hold them off. I'm not leaving you. Liam yelled. But Kara didn't listen. She stepped forward, her wings glowing brighter than ever. The air around her seemed to vibrate, charged with energy. Liam watched in horror as she prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, the final stand. The cave chamber shook violently as the Vorax drones poured in, their sleek, black forms darting through the air like shadows with intent. Their red beams scanned the cavern, illuminating the jagged walls in ominous bursts of light. Liam and Kara stood at the center, surrounded by glowing crystals that seemed to pulse in sync with the shard embedded in Kara's side. Kara's wings flared, their glow brighter than Liam had ever seen. Her presence felt almost otherworldly, commanding, yet fragile. She turned to him, her expression a mix of resolve and sorrow. Liam, she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. This is where it ends. No, Liam replied immediately, his voice rising. We're in this together. There has to be another way. Kara shook her head. If they take the shard, Earth will fall. Millions will die. This is the only way to stop them. The drones closed in, their red beams narrowing as they locked onto Kara. Liam grabbed a piece of crystal from the ground and hurled it at the nearest drone. It hit with a satisfying crack, sending the machine spiraling into the cavern wall. I'm not letting you do this alone. he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Kara glanced at him, something soft flickering in her golden eyes. "You're brave, Liam." "Foolish, but brave." The largest drone hovered at the chamber's entrance, its size dwarfing the others. It emitted a deafening screech that reverberated through the cavern, shaking loose debris from the ceiling. Kara winced, her feathers dimming for a moment. "They're calling reinforcements," she said, her voice tight. "There's no time." Kara stepped forward, her wings glowing so brightly now that they bathed the cavern in golden light. The shard embedded in her side pulsed in rhythm, its energy growing more intense with each passing second. The drones hesitated, as if sensing the power building within her. "What are you doing?" Liam asked, panic rising in his chest. Kara didn't look back. "The shard and I are connected. If I channel my life force into it, I can create an energy pulse strong enough to destroy the drones and the Vorax." "And you?" Liam demanded, his voice cracking. "I won't survive it," she said simply. Liam's heart pounded. "There has to be another way. Let me help." "You've already helped more than you know," Kara said, turning to him with a faint smile. "You reminded me what it means to fight for something worth saving." Before Liam could protest, Kara spread her wings wide, their glow now blinding. The air around her shimmered, vibrating with raw energy. The shard in her side pulsed faster, its light syncing with hers until they were one brilliant entity. The drones surged forward, their red beams converging on Kara. But before they could strike, she released a cry, sharp, piercing, and impossibly powerful. The sound wave rippled through the cavern, shattering the glowing crystals and sending the drones crashing to the ground in a cascade of sparks. The energy from the shard exploded outward, a golden wave that consumed everything in its path. Liam shielded his eyes, the sheer force of the blast knocking him to the ground. The cavern trembled as the wave spread, obliterating the drones and the Vorax signal that had summoned them. When the light faded, the chamber was silent. Liam opened his eyes, his ears ringing. The air was still, the cave now bathed in an eerie calm. He scrambled to his feet, searching desperately for Kara. He found her at the center of the chamber, her wings folded around her like a cocoon. The glow of the shard was gone, its energy spent. Kara's feathers were dull, her breathing shallow. "Kara." Liam rushed to her side, kneeling beside her. "You're going to be okay. We'll find a way to save you." She opened her eyes slowly, her gaze soft but weary. "It's done," she whispered. "The Vorax, they're gone." Liam shook his head, his hands gripping hers. "You don't have to go. Stay. We can figure this out." Kara smiled faintly, a single tear trailing down her cheek. "You'll be fine, Liam. You're stronger than you think." Her wings shimmered one last time before falling still. The shard, now lifeless, slipped from her side and into Liam's hands. It was cool to the touch, its power extinguished. Liam sat there for what felt like hours, holding the shard and staring at the still form of the being who had given everything to save his world. The weight of her sacrifice pressed heavily on him, but so did the resolve to honor her memory. As Liam emerged from the cave, the first rays of dawn broke through the trees. The forest was quiet, the threat of the Vorax finally gone. In his hand, he held the shard, a reminder of Kara's bravery and the cost of freedom. He looked up at the sky, where the stars still lingered faintly. "Thank you," he whispered. The shard pulsed faintly in response, as if acknowledging his words. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something greater, a legacy that Liam would carry forward. The world would never know the name of Kara the Avaran, but Liam would make sure her sacrifice was not forgotten. And somewhere, deep in the cosmos, the faint glow of Kara's light remained, a beacon of hope in the endless dark. The final stand. The cave trembled as the Vorax's forces closed in, their screeching drones sending echoes through the twisting tunnels. Liam clutched the shard Kara had entrusted to him moments earlier, its faint glow pulsing in his hand like a heartbeat. Kara stood in front of him, her wings stretched wide, glowing with a fiery intensity that lit the cavern. "We can still escape," Liam shouted, his voice barely carrying over the rumble of approaching doom. Kara turned her head slightly, her golden eyes meeting his. "They won't stop, Liam. Not until everything is gone." Her voice was calm, almost serene, but there was a weight to her words that struck him like a blow. "There has to be another way," he pleaded, stepping closer. "We can figure this out, together." She smiled faintly. "Together, we've already done so much. But this is something only I can finish." Before Liam could respond, the first of the drones appeared, its sleek form cutting through the dim light like a predator in the dark. Its red beams swept the chamber, locking onto Kara. She didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped forward, her wings folding back as energy began to ripple through her feathers. The drone lunged, its beam firing a crackling bolt of energy. Kara moved with a speed and grace Liam had never seen before, her wings deflecting the attack and sending the drone spiraling into the wall. It exploded in a flash of sparks, but more drones swarmed into the chamber, their screeches deafening. "They're relentless," Liam yelled, gripping the shard tighter. "What do they even want?" "They want this," Kara said, motioning to the shard. "It's the key to their expansion, the core of their weaponry. With it, they'll enslave worlds. Your world." Liam's jaw tightened. "Then we destroy it. Together." Kara shook her head. "The shard's energy is tied to me. Destroying it will release a force so powerful it will obliterate everything nearby." Her voice softened. "Including me." "No." Liam stepped forward, his hands trembling. "We'll find another way." "There isn't time," she said, her wings spreading again as the energy in the chamber surged. "But you can make sure this sacrifice means something." The drones advanced, their beams firing in unison. Kara leaped into the air, her wings creating a shockwave that sent the nearest drones crashing to the ground. The shard in Liam's hand began to glow brighter, as if responding to Kara's energy. "You need to leave, Liam," she said, her voice echoing with a strange melodic resonance. "Take the shard far from here." "I'm not leaving you," Liam shouted, his heart pounding. Kara turned to him, her expression filled with both sorrow and determination. "You have to. If the shard remains intact, the Vorax will never stop. You can't let that happen." Before he could argue, the largest drone appeared, a massive mechanical beast that hovered ominously at the chamber's entrance. Its form was covered in pulsing red lights, and its presence seemed to suck the air from the room. Kara's glow intensified. "Go," she said firmly. "Now." Liam hesitated, his body frozen with indecision. But the look in Kara's eyes was undeniable. She had made her choice, and now it was his turn to trust her. Reluctantly, he turned and ran, the shard's glow lighting his way through the dark tunnels. Behind him, he heard the sound of Kara's wings, the roar of the drones, and then a piercing cry. It wasn't just a sound. It was a wave of energy, raw and overwhelming. The cavern shook violently, and a brilliant light erupted behind him, illuminating the tunnels as if a star had exploded in the heart of the cave. Liam stumbled, falling to the ground as the shockwave passed over him. When he looked back, the glow had faded, replaced by an eerie silence. When Liam returned to the chamber, it was unrecognizable. The drones were gone, their shattered remains scattered across the ground. The walls were scorched, the crystals dim, and at the center of it all was Kara, or what remained of her. Her wings were folded around her like a cocoon, their glow extinguished. Liam approached slowly, his chest tight. "Kara," he whispered, his voice breaking. She didn't respond, but her feathers shimmered faintly, just for a moment. It was as if she was saying goodbye. In her place, the shard lay dark and lifeless. Liam picked it up, its cool surface a stark contrast to the warmth it once held. He held it tightly, his knuckles white, as tears streamed down his face. "I'll make it matter," he said softly. "I promise." As he emerged from the cave, the first light of dawn broke through the trees. The air was still, the world quiet. Liam looked up at the sky, where the stars were fading into the morning light. The shard in his hand pulsed faintly, as if responding to his thoughts. It was a reminder of what had been lost, and what had been saved. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a new fight, a new purpose. Liam would carry Kara's legacy forward, ensuring her sacrifice wasn't in vain. Somewhere, in the vastness of the universe, the Voraks were still out there, but so was the memory of Kara, a light that would never truly fade.